welcome to my channel. I'm Steve Down and this is my guitar. If you're just joining us, what we do here is we take jazz pieces and we dissect them. So we don't just look at helping you to learn how to play the tune or just transcribing it. We actually take the tune apart, have a look at what the soloist did and what they might be thinking, and then I help you with some exercises and examples to be able to play your own solos over the top of these pieces. This week we're starting a new series, Series 16. We're taking a look at Kenny Burrell's Soul Lament, taken from his 1963 album Midnight Blue. So I've done a few tunes from this album. I've done Mule and Chitlins Con Carne and Midnight Blue. This one was voted for by my patrons over on Patreon. If you would like to subscribe to Patreon whilst we're talking about it, the link is here. Patreon.com/Exeter Guitar Lessons. And over there you can get all of the transcriptions and exercise and example and arpeggio, chord, scale packs, and a few extra bits for everything on my YouTube channel. So head over there if you want all of that. It's as little as $3 or £3 a month over there. So please do go over there if that's what you'd like. If you don't want to do that, but you'd like to support the channel, then there's a Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes below. And if you don't want to do any of that, but you really like what I do here, please do like and subscribe and drop me a comment below because I really like to hear from people. Whilst we're talking about Patreon and subscribing, I'd like to thank my patrons that have signed up in the last couple of weeks. So thanks to Romain, Michael, Mark, Matthew, Niall, Clef, Robert, Andy, Soreen, Eddie, Guy, David, Lissart, John, Andy and Christoph. If I've mispronounced anyone's name, then I'm really sorry. Do let me know how I pronounce your name if I have. Okay, let's take a look at the first 14 bars here. So this piece I'm not approaching as I have all the other pieces on YouTube here, and that's purely because it's a bit of an unorthodox structure. The way that Kenny's kind of composed this, it's more of a performance piece, probably composed, I would imagine, and there's a small amount of improvisation in here, but not a huge amount. The way that it's structured is that there is an A section, and that's repeated 3 times with an interlude in between the first and the second time, and then there's a B section, and then he returns to the A section again, and then there's a coda towards the end. It could well have been completely and utterly improvised. He may well have had a couple of different ideas for an A section and a B section, and then he might have just improvised the structure of it, and he might have improvised the melody line on there. Who knows? Unless we've got the studio notes, we really don't know. But all I do know is that it isn't exactly the same as some of the other things that are on Midnight Blue, the album. It doesn't follow a head, solo, head kind of structure. So the way that I've broken this down is that this week we're going to take a look up to bar 38. Right now we're going to take a look at those bars that you've just seen, bars 1 to 14, which is basically the first playthrough of the A section. So the first chord that we hear here is an E minor add 9. He strums all the way through. So this sets us up into the key of E minor that we're in. We know that E minor has the same notes as G major. So the notes are E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, D, E. So we sometimes know that as the E Aeolian mode because it's built off of the 6th note of the G major scale. But we're not modal here, so we don't need to think too much about that. So we're in E minor, and the first chord, E minor at 9, which is a lovely chord, nice open sounding chord. And the fact that we've got this F sharp clashing with the G there gives it a really, really nice tonal quality. Okay, so he plays that, and then we've got this melody line. Okay, and that line there is built off of the E minor pentatonic scale. There's nothing fancy about it. It's the E minor pentatonic scale, and that is this. This first part here is... and then he goes down to these chords here. So what we're doing here is this is an E minor type chord again, but he's moving the 5th up to the flat 13. So we call this E minor flat 13. And then back down again to E minor at 9. Okay, we've got a very quick movement there. Again, it's still E minor pentatonic, so all of those notes that you've just seen in that scale, they're all the ones that he's using for this melody line here. And then he plays again the chords, and then plays the melody line again. Okay. One of the things that I want to talk about here is this very, very quick pickup that he's got. Okay, because it's extremely quick. This tune obviously isn't being played to any kind of beat in the background, so you've got no kind of metronomic pulse going on. There's no drummer, there's no one tapping their feet. It's very much rubato, which basically means that he's kind of following his own kind of tempo on this, and he's speeding up and slowing down. And I've seen some transcriptions of this try to really get to grips with what he's doing, and they've put in bars of 12/16 and bars of 3/4 and 5/8 and all sorts in order to be able to kind of try and make it metronomic. And you don't need to do that at all. He's probably thinking, I think, just simply in 4/4, but he's just speeding up and slowing down gradually at the phrase points or at the bar points. Okay, so he might be kind of pausing here. So you can hear there that I'm kind of speeding up and slowing down, but we don't need to change the time signature here. It's just a tempo thing. But this little bit here, this really quick pickup, that there can be quite tricky. Now, I can hear he's playing it with alternate picking. So the first one is a down, the second one is an up, and the next one is a down. It may well be, useful to try economy picking, which is where you play 2 downs like that, because it's easier to go in the direction that you're moving when you're doing stuff that is quicker, like that. But I can hear that he's not doing that. I can hear with the tone of his pick strike that it's definitely alternate picking that he's playing there. So I would advise that you do that. Now, there's an exercise if you're finding this a little bit difficult to do the quick part, is by playing through the minor pentatonic and using that phrase that he's using. So here's that. The next part about the A section here is we've got some chords. So we've got the chords of A minor 9 and then a D13. Okay, so an A minor 9 is the notes of A, C, E, G, and also an added B. Okay, so really nice, lovely voicing there, and then it moves nicely with really good voice leading to D13. Okay, so here we've just got a C, F sharp, B, that's your 13, and then the D on the top. So we've got everything we need in order to make it a dominant 13 chord. Minor 9 to a 13, and then he plays 2 notes there, the B and the A, and that is essentially a 2-5-1. So, and that is essentially a 2-5 in G. So if you wanted to, you could round it off with a G major 7 there, but he doesn't do that. He goes to a C13, so it goes to here. Okay, so we've got the 9 in the top as well, so notes of B flat, E, and then there's the 13 there, the A, and we've got a 9 in the top, a D, and then going back to the C, so, and then going to an altered chord, starts off as a normal straight dominant, so, and then he adds in the sharp 5 there. This one is quite tricky to play. I think he's got his thumb over the top of it, but you could quite easily play it like this as well, but you'd have to be really careful that you mute the A string as you strum through. I would play it with my thumb over the top of it. I'm barring with my first finger, and I've also got my second finger on the top string here, and then my third finger is on the 8th fret on the 3rd string, which is the D sharp here, and then I bring in the sharp 5, the double F, the F double sharp, or just G here. So, but it's easier if I've got my thumb over the top of it to strum through, because then my thumb is pressing down on that B on the E string here, but it's also the fleshy part of my thumb is muting that 5th string there, so we don't get that one there kind of making any noise there if I mute it. So it's a nice easier way of playing it. This movement here, C13, and then going to B7 to B7 sharp 5, that movement there is what we would call a tritone substitution here. Some people might not agree with me too much on that one. They might think that it's not a strict tritone substitution because it hasn't got the sharp 11 in there. but just the general movement, the fact that we've got a semitone above the fifth, then going to the fifth, I would see that as a tritone substitution. What I'd see it as a substitution of is a substitution of the 2 chord, or the 2 minor 7 flat 5. Because we're heading towards a minor chord, we would have, if we were playing this orthodoxly, we'd have a minor 7 flat 5, an F sharp minor 7 flat 5, going to a B7 sharp 5 likely, and then going back to our E minor 9. What he does is he takes a tritone away from the F sharp and makes it a dominant, and then moves down to B7 from there. Now, this is a thing that we hear quite a bit in the 1950s and 60s. Gershwin used it an awful lot. You hear it in a lot of different jazz standards, this semitone dominant chord above the fifth, going to the fifth, and then back to the 1. Instead of doing a 2, 5, 1, we do that instead. So if you were making some kind of jazz style tunes up, you might think to use that as an alternative to the 2, 5, 1 in minor. You might want to use what we would call a flat 6 dominant chord to a 5 chord, and then to your 1, your minor 9. After that, we've got this kind of interlude for 8 bars, which uses those chords again. The minor add 9 going to the minor 13. And then we've got another added chord. And this chord here I've termed as minor 6 add 9. If you've got your own spelling of that chord, let me know. That was the best one that I could think of. So here, those chords there, you might recognize them. Again, early 60s. What have we got in the early 60s? We've got that Dr. No James Bond film that came out, which I'm pretty sure is 1962. Correct me if I'm wrong, James Bond fans. But the James Bond theme, as we all know, has got the chords underneath that do that. So you've got that movement of the 5th to the flat 6 to the 6th, and then back to the flat 6 again. So he's using this, and this could be a direct lift or just a allusion to it. It could be a tribute. It could be Kenny's way of saying, I really like James Bond, who knows? Or he could be, saying, I really like, John Barry. Although I know there is a little bit of an argument about who actually wrote the theme tune to there. I'm fairly sure it wasn't John Barry who actually originally wrote the theme tune. But I can't remember off the top of my head what the original name was. I used to work for, and still do occasionally work for an orchestra, the James Bond Orchestra. And Warren Ringham, who runs that orchestra, told me all the time about who originally wrote the theme tune there. But all that to say, we do have that kind of James Bondy movement, the 5 to flat 6 to 6, back to flat 6 again. And the other interesting thing that we've, and what would be useful if you're learning this sound, is to play it in a few other different positions. So here are some more positions of playing the same movement. It's a useful movement if you've got a very static harmony at one point in a tune, because you still maintain that E minor sound, but you've got some interest going on there. So if you've got a point in a tune where you've got the minor chord ringing for a while, it's worth using that movement there. The other thing that we've got here is he's actually using some hybrid picking. So he's using his pick for the bottom string, and then he's using his annular finger, which is your ring finger, for the top string. Okay, so it's definitely worth practicing that. Here's an exercise for practicing that. And then coming out of that, we've then got, we're going back to another repeat of the A section. So, okay, and he actually plays that one there. It mutes really, really quickly on the record, and I think it might have been like, an accident possibly, or it might have been something that just didn't come through. I've played it, but I think I've played it a little bit more kind of too perfect than Kenny actually plays it on the original. And then that melody line there is slightly different from the first time he plays it, because the first time is, and the second time here is, so he leans a little bit more on the B at the end of the phrase. Again, it's worth practicing that. Here's some exercises for making sure you've got the correct rhythm. And then he plays the melody line again. And then we are in the 2-5 without a 1. Back to the flat 6 substitution, the tritone substitution. And then to that. And then we're into the little interlude at the end before we play the A section again, which we'll look at next week. And the ending here is very final. There. So kind of almost reminds me of some Spanish influence music from around that time, some of the stuff that you hear on Sketches of Spain. There was an awful lot of kind of interest in South American music around the early 60s. You've got a lot of the kind of Stan Getz and Gilberto records coming out, and you've also got Miles's interest in it as well. Quiet Nights, which I think is really underrated. And obviously Sketches of Spain as well is out around this kind of similar time. And I think, probably Kenny, I would imagine, would have picked up on some of that influence. And I think that particular rhythm there at the end, then there, and also the kind of the movement with the 5th flat 6 to 6 back to flat 6 movement is very kind of Spanish Peninsula. Okay, that's up to bar 38, and that's where I'm going to stop today. Next week, we're going to take a look at the next A section, the third one that he plays, and then the B section. There'll be 3 more episodes in this series. I'm going to do next week, have a look at the next A section and the B section, and then we'll take a look at the A section again at the end and the coda, and then there'll be a full transcription of the piece as well. Obviously no backing track because there is no backing to this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pop up onto Patreon my Kemper profile for free. If you've got a Kemper or a Kemper 2 or one of the stage profilers, then you can use my profile. For anyone who wants to know if they've got an amp at home, it's a Fender 74 Champ profile, and what I will also do is I'll pop up onto Patreon as well my tone settings so that you can see what tone I would use, even if it was a real amp and not a digital profiled amp modeler. I'll still put up my tone settings, and then you guys can see exactly what I'm using. But please do make sure that you go through this piece, and for once I'm going to say try and actually learn it just as Kenny's done it. But do try and use some of the techniques that he's got in maybe stuff that you're using, like I said about the movement, the James Bondy 5th to flat 6, 6 to flat 6 movement. You can use that if you've got a bit of static harmony going on in a piece of your own. And some of the techniques, the quick semi-quaver movements with alternate picking over the top of the minor pentatonic scale, you can use that as well quite easily. And as well as that, you might have picked up from here some new voicings of minor 9 to 13 movements in a major 2-5-1, and then also the substitution for the 2 in a minor 2-5-1 context as well. Hopefully you found something that you can take away from this. I look forward to seeing you all next week. Happy practicing. Take care. Bye.